Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Vault IGN episode 20. I'm your host, Jared Petty, joined on my right by
Miranda Sanchez. Hello.
Across the table from her.
I'm Brendan Graber. Hi.
And to his right, our special guest.
Hi, Jeremy Parish.
Jeremy, you are the editor-in-chief of USgamer.
That's right, USgamer.net.
You also come here as an alumni of IGN and 1UP before that.
I worked here for like 2 months after 1UP folded.
Okay, and then went on to glorious things. In addition to USgamer, you also do a couple other game-related
just side projects. The Retronauts Classic Gaming Podcast and some curation of things like the Game Boy library.
Well,
someone's got to.
Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
I'm really glad you're here.
You notice a lack of fallout in that list of things I do, but that's okay. I'll do my best here.
Well, Jeremy agreed to come on because we're doing something a little different today on a very special episode of Vault. No one will be locked in a refrigerator. Nothing
Really?
like that's. Yeah, no, we're not gonna learn a valuable life lesson about pregnancy. Instead, we're gonna. Yeah, although that could be fun. I mean.
No, let's pass.
Okay, we're going to pass on that. Instead, while we're still going to talk about this show's themed around DLC. Fallout 4 altogether has 6 pieces of DLC either released or on the way, and we are going to talk about those later on. But I thought this would be kind of a fun opportunity for us to talk about the history of DLC and particularly expansion DLC. And to go over how that became a part of gaming culture. And that's why Jeremy's here, because he knows quite a bit about the history of video games. So we're going to go over some of that, then talk about how that relates to Fallout, because Fallout and Bethesda games in general lately have been very DLC heavy, and move forward from there. So before that, though, any announcements anybody have? We're good? Anything? Nope. Thank you so much for listening. By the way, please remember that you can find Vault IGN on iOS, PS4, and Xbox apps, and other kinds of nifty places like that, Roku, and probably your Commodore 64 if you really want to. I'm sure you could find a way to rig that. Thank you so much for listening. So let's get into that first main discussion. Let's talk about downloadable content and expansion packs in the beginning. And what was the beginning?
Oh, is this my cue?
Well, why not?
I mean, if you
anybody
really
jump
want, it depends on how you want to define downloadable content and stuff. But if you look back at the very beginning of video games, like the very first thing that most people consider a video game, Space War, was developed on these massive mainframe computers at universities, and those spread through what limited internet existed back then, the ARPANET.
Right.
People would share them either by tapes or punch cards or whatever, or by very primitive phone lines. And so it was this one game that kind of spread out to a lot of different, like what few places actually had the power, the processing power to produce it or to play it. And people who got their hands on it at other places, it was spread from MIT to other universities in the military. The people who had the access to it started to develop add-ons to it. So Space War, set in space, 2 spaceships shooting against each other. There's a sun in the middle that has gravity fields that affects you. And so, it's very basic. So someone put together something called Expensive Planetarium, which basically just added an actual star chart, like based on the real stars that you see in the sky, to the back of this to the game.
Yeah.
And that was something that people could add to their Space War experience. It was called Expensive Planetarium because processing cycles, computer cycles, were so expensive back then that it actually was a huge investment of time and resources.
Yeah, there were not that many places you could go to play a video game in the 1960s.
No, I mean, you had to work for one of the top universities or in the military. Basically.
And so these guys fooling around at MIT, the Tech Model Railroad Club, and some other students invent Space War, Steve Russell, among others. And it spreads out to the Stanford AI Lab and other places through that primitive internet. It's interesting to know that we're going to talk a lot, I think, today about the distinction, if there even should be any, between mods and expansions. Because a mod is an expansion. It's just generally speaking, a non-commercial expansion, or at least it begins that way. We're going to focus, I think, for the sake of just keeping this from being a 3-hour discussion, on the commercial expansions. But there's no way to talk about this without talking about mods, because in every way but capitalism, a mod is fundamentally the same kind of thing. So don't be afraid to jump in there as well. Also, you talked about them being on tapes. From what I understand, the tape kind of sat in the drawer there by the desk, and anybody that wanted to could come along and fool with it pull it out, a different student than the one who was, Steve Russell was working on it, but somebody else might think, I think I can improve the gravity routine. And when he came back to play his own game, you might find a new version of it sitting there.
Yeah, I mean, prior to Atari creating arcade games and trying to monetize them in 1971, 72, the idea behind video games was just like this shared intellectual property. The idea was that it was communal and that you could take it and share it with people and that other people should be able to build on it. And the idea of ownership hadn't really come into association with video games at that point. And, everyone knows Oregon Trail, and that started in like 1971 in Minnesota as like a teaching experiment on a teletype machine. It didn't even have a monitor. It like printed out your commands and instructions, and you would, put a new input in. And that spread also first throughout, Minneapolis or wherever it was begun, and then throughout the country. And it wasn't sold; it was just shared. It wasn't until later that MECC, the company that evolved out of this project, started to sell it as a commercial product. So yeah, in a very real way, I think the modern concept of DLC and expansions is kind of dependent on the idea of video games being a for-profit creation. Like before that, it was just this evolving thing, and people would contribute, and it would evolve and grow on its own just naturally as people began tinkering and improving.
And since these computers were already connected, there was no reason not to share it out with other people and see what they, and that's apparently eventually Nolan Bushnell, who invented Pong at some point, played, or who was involved in inventing Pong, played some version of Space War during his time at university, and it helped shape what he was able to do with that. So let's move ahead a little bit and talk about that commercialization. What is the first piece of DLC or the first expansion that you guys remember playing? What's the first one you remember buying or that someone had bought that you played? Let's start with Brendan. Brendan, what do you remember playing first?
Off the top of my head,
yeah,
probably if it wasn't Morrowind, it's probably the Warcraft 2 Beyond Dark Portal expansion.
Okay.
And that was like Blizzard has a nice history of expansions. Like all their RTSs, Diablo as well.
Mm-hmm.
I remember back then it was just like having you finished Warcraft 2, you're like, okay, that was good, and then like, oh, by the way, coming back with more content. This time we're going to a different area, and they reused like the assets were very simple, but they managed to like do palette swaps and like do terrain differently, add just a few more little enticing details to get you to back in and more story. And like remember that being just such a big deal for me, like going like, hey, I get to experience all new stuff from a world I already love.
Do you remember feeling odd? Like, was the idea of an expansion weird to you, or was it just something that you accepted from your computer literacy?
Yeah, I think I for the most part, it was a very odd experience to go like, this is not Warcraft 3. This is just still Warcraft 2, but there's more of it. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, I feel like I'm inserting another quarter continue in a way, but like this is a whole new experience. Yeah, it was very different.
What about you, Miranda?
The Sims.
The Sims
Expansion packs were my big thing. Like I had to have them all, but my parents, I was young enough to where my parents were like, you cannot have hot date. You're not ready to go on a hot date.
But you can simulate one.
Did hot dates include hot dates? I mean, was that where they introduced the clouds over the bed thing? Or?
No, sex was already part of it.
Okay,
hot dates was just that you get to go on steamy nights out with your significant other.
Love hotels?
But, I don't remember. Okay. I wasn't allowed to play it.
Oh, you weren't allowed to play it, so you didn't know. Yeah. But the other ones you did buy.
Yeah, so I got Unleashed, which is the pets. Like I don't know, Sims. I didn't think of it as like DLC. Like this expansion was just, hey, here's more stuff for you. I was like, yeah, we have to get it because you already have like this robust game that I was already enjoying. And it's like, well, why wouldn't I want to add pets for my Sims? Like, I need them to have that.
Yeah, it's a paradigm that works well with computers, especially with PCs early on, which had the rewritable media. It was an idea that you could get your head around. Well, I'm just adding more to this, but it's hardly limited to video games. I mean, you buy toys, collect all four. You buy the big play set, and then you want the action figures to go with it. Or I'm convinced. I can't prove this at all, but that there's some connection between the fact that Dungeons & Dragons was so popular among early game designers, and Dungeons & Dragons was built around expansion modules. You bought the core rule set that let you play the game, and then you kept buying or creating new expansions. Again, kind of modding versus commercial. I think there's a connection. Any of you guys play D&D back in the day?
Very, very, very briefly.
No? Okay.
But yeah, even the concept of you go on an adventure, but then you want something else. You want a new adventure with new things that you didn't experience the first time, and whether you had to buy different modules or rule books to get more of like, I forget what they're called, but just like more tool sets and dungeons and like more concepts you can explore with it, that helps the DM go on. Just that, I think, yeah, that probably could have helped in the rise of expansion content for games.
Jeremy, do you recall the first expansion you played, or what, do you have an early memory?
That I bought or played?
Let's go for both.
Bought, I guess you could consider Street Fighter 2 Turbo for Super NES an expansion. It was priced at full price, the same as the first Street Fighter 2, because there was no way to add on. But, I wanted to play as those 4 extra characters and have the extra speed options. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we were limited to in the console days before downloads and things like that. It was like, if you want to play the new stuff, you got to pay in full for the new stuff.
Yeah, you got to buy that new cartridge, with the strange exception, one of the weirdest pieces of early console DLC, and I realize we're jumping all over here, but I've given up on order already. Sonic and Knuckles, one of the very early examples of DLC content on a console.
That's a great example of a publisher holding back content for an expansion, because they actually cut the Knuckles content out of Sonic 3 and then sold it to people as the expansion.
Right, and Sonic and Knuckles, did any of you guys own it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so
my
Brennan,
friend did
describe the miracle of lock-on technology, in case some of our listeners don't know it.
It's been a while, but I mean, for a 2D running platformer, being able to lock onto things, just like...
I'm talking about the actual lock-on technology of Sonic and Knuckles, like
oh,
that.
You mean that lock-on? I was just like, it's been a while. I remember that.
Yeah, no, you're talking about not Z-targeting. No. I was like, wait a minute.
Z-targeting? Is that what we're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the actual lock-on, the physical lock-on.
The physical locking on of the actual cartridge was like, you felt like you were doing something like illegal. It was just like, can I do this? And then also the Game Genie came around too, where just like you're locking on different cartridges to get more content that you shouldn't be able to normally. It felt like you were like breaking the law in a way, and it was kind of like enticing, just like, oh yeah, I'm not supposed to do this. I'm gonna just like, now I have Knuckles, now I have infinite lives, now I can hack the levels to my whims.
Yeah, Dave Barry, the humorist, has a wonderful story about his book on it. He took a trip to Japan in around that same period of time, and he was invited to visit Nintendo with his child, and his kid kept asking about Game Genie. Which was not an official or endorsed Nintendo product by any stretch of the imagination, and everyone just showed much polite bemusement there about that. But yeah, Sonic and Knuckles was a cartridge that you could plug another cartridge into, and it modified Sonic 1, 2, and 3 in interesting ways, or I don't know, interesting-esque.
Yeah, and that concept kind of evolved out of sort of things that predated that, like are you familiar with the Aladdin game enhancer or whatever that was?
Yeah.
It was basically like a Nintendo NES cartridge, and it didn't really play anything on its own, but there were like mini cartridges you could buy, and it was more inexpensive, so you'd plug those in. And those, I think, kind of evolved out of like the Starpath Supercharger for Atari 2600, which was like a kind of basic cassette drive, and you could plug in sort of expansions and games into the cassette drive, and gave you a cheaper way to play Atari games. Yeah,
it also had increased RAM, and I love the Supercharger. You guys ever seen this thing? It's so weird. You take a 2600 and plug this giant like lever into it, and then that has a cord that plugs into a tape player, and you load games from the tape player. You can actually hook a modern CD player up to it and load games through sound. It's a bizarre, really weird, neat piece of technology. While we're on that, I mean, I don't know if this counts as downloadable content or not, but there were places in the world, computer games used to be stored on cassette tapes, and there were places where they would broadcast the code for a game through radio, and if you had your tape recorder on at just the right moment, you could record a program for your computer, and then you'd take that, run it through your tape player into your PC, and you would have a game or a word processor or something, whatever they had written it for.
So bizarre.
Isn't that strange?
I've never heard of that, but the same idea showed up on Nintendo DS with Bangai-O Spirits, where you could create custom levels and then play like an audio sound file that you could save onto tape, send over the internet, and not on tape, but you could record it and then send it over the internet, and other people could play that back into the cartridge and play the levels you created. That was their way of working around Nintendo's lack of a network.
It's so weird.
People tried
It's
so
like the
many
only
ways.
it's like the only online function for any DS game that works now that they killed the GameSpy servers.
It still works then,
Yeah.
right? That
Wow.
would make sense. Of course it would. That's weird, Miranda.
Yeah.
It's just
I
incredible.
didn't know that was even a thing.
You know, circling back to the whole adding on, like locking on more content to a cartridge, it kind of looks like the precursor to patches in a lot of ways. Like before, you could say like, you got to download this patch if you want this new content. They go, let's just release like a better version of this game, and then that's where you had like Ultimate Editions or Gold Editions or my favorite, Lords of Magic Special Edition.
Oh, that's a great game.
I brought.
I like Lords
The
of Magic Special
the game
Edition.
only we played, they eventually released a special edition of the game, which was mostly the same game, but they added on a couple different modes, and they fixed a lot of the old bugs because it was a very buggy game. Even with the special edition, it's still a very buggy game. And they allowed things that people wanted but didn't get in the original game, like being able to customize your starting lord and his like whole party of people. They give you like, okay, give you these points and you can allocate them, and like they listen to feedback and said, instead of having to patch this game, we'll release a new expansion with a lot of people's, what they wanted to see in this new version.
Building on that and jumping back to Jeremy talking about Street Fighter Turbo, what is it, an expansion if it comes in a new cartridge with all the... Yes, it is, because it's not a true sequel, but people tried, sometimes you just put the whole game in there with something else. People did some weird hybrid stuff early on too. The first, not the first, but an early PC expansion that was actually commercially designed, where you had to have the original game, and then you bought a scenario pack, again, kind of based on the D&D model. There's this game called Dungeon Quest. I've never been able to say Temple of Offsi correct, but Temple of Asai, Temple of Zasi, Temple of Apasi, whatever, predates Akalabeth even. It's one of the earlier computer RPGs, not the earliest, but one of the earlier ones. And it had an expansion pack that required you to have the original game. So much like our modern DLC, where if you buy a Call of Duty map, it's not going to work without Call of Duty. This was the same way. You bought this disc, but if you didn't have the other disc, it didn't work. But then you'd have some weird hybrid situations. Any of you guys ever played Wizardry: Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord?
I'm familiar with it, and yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Right. So Wizardry 2 and 3, or at least Wizardry 2 in the early PC versions, you couldn't play it without characters from Wizardry 1. So you had to make characters in Wizardry 1, play them through to the end of the game, and you can describe this, Jeremy.
I mean, yeah, you've got it right there. You would transfer those characters into the game and into the third game, and then you could actually send your characters and stuff back to Surtech, the publisher, and they would take the code, the info from characters, from players, different players' parties, and use those in Wizardry 4,
right,
in which you play as the villain trying to escape from the dungeon where he's imprisoned, and character parties, like player parties, would show up as enemies, and you would actually have to fight the characters that people had actually played as and beaten the game with.
That's amazing.
Yes,
as random NPC encounters.
Yeah, you made your party, mailed it to them, and they were your enemies.
Can we still do this? This sounds like an amazing concept.
Right, it's about 30 years too late.
I know.
Yeah. I think Rob Woodhead, last I checked, one of the guys that developed that, he's still at Animigo, so I don't know.
Yeah, he does Kickstarters now.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that.
You should support them. You get really cool anime on, like classic 80s anime on Blu-ray.
Ooh.
Miranda, tell us more about this strange anime product. What is anime?
It's this wonderful, wonderful kind of cartoon from Japan.
Okay.
They're really great. And the one you should be watching right now is ReZero.
Okay.
That's all I got to say about
Is
it.
it,
All right, we'll start
is
there.
Is it preceded by Yay?
Yeah, anime. All
Yeah,
right, there we go.
to IGN Anime Club. It's a good time.
So rolling this back around from the far past, eventually this became kind of standard industry practice, and you'd see a lot of these. So let's move. Oh no, I'm gonna do one more diversion, or I'm gonna forget about it. But I was at CalX, California Extreme, which is an arcade convention here, and there was a cabinet that a 15-year-old kid worked on called Crazy Otto, that's based on the game that Miss Pac-Man was eventually adapted from. And he's worked with the original creators of Miss Pac-Man, who originally made Crazy Otto. But Crazy Otto started life as an expansion board for Pac-Man. I'm describing this really badly. Jeremy, why don't you take a jump here?
Yeah, I mean, back in the arcade era, people would play games and then think we could make this better, or we could, operators would be like, we could get more life out of this by kind of hacking the boards and making it play faster or adding new colors or something like that. So that was just kind of like a thing that people did. Like they would create modification boards for arcade games. There was a company called General Computer Corporation that created a modification called Crazy Auto based on Pac-Man. And there was some shenanigans that went back and forth between Midway, the US distributor for Pac-Man, and eventually they said, you know what? Instead of shutting you down with your hack of Pac-Man, we're going to bring it as an official product and call it Ms. Pac-Man. And so like they changed up the sprites, so instead of being like this weird thing that you could see from the front, it was this weird looking character called Otto. They just changed it so it's Ms. Pac-Man, gave Pac-Man lipstick and a beauty mark and an eye and a bow, and it's the classic we know. And for a long time Namco was like, hey, we didn't actually make this game, so we're not really sure about it. But eventually they kind of brought it back in, and now Namco does release that as a like canonical Pac-Man title, which is good because much to Namco's chagrin, it's actually the best Pac-Man game.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. Ms. Pac-Man's a great game, and started life sort of as an expansion, which is kind of neat. And that kid I mentioned, he worked with the original Pac-Man creators to create a sanctioned replica of the Crazy Auto machine.
Wow.
There's when I was 15, I was picking my nose and staring off into the woods. I'm very impressed. All right, let's move it forward back into the console era again. We talked about Sonic and Knuckles, which is kind of an early example. What about other expansions that you might have seen on console early on?
I didn't see it myself because I lived in America, so none of us saw it. But back in the NES era, Japan had an add-on for a console add-on for the Japanese NES, the Famicom, called the Disk System, which allowed you to play diskette games on your NES. And there were actually kiosks at stores you could go to. There were these, normally the discs were yellow, but the blue discs were blank, and you could take them and pay like $5 for a game and download it onto the cartridge. And a few of those games that they created were actually expansions. There was something called USA Golf Course, or something, USA Course Golf. I don't remember. Anyway, like you remember the original NES Golf from like 1985. This was an expansion on that added new levels and new courses, like an entire new golf course to it.
So you could expand your NES games there on
Yeah, there was a
disc.
Japan course and there was a USA course. So it was like all this extra golf content that Americans didn't receive because we just got the cartridge. But in Japan, you could take a disc writer kiosk or a disc to the disc writer kiosk and buy the expansion for golf really cheaply.
And we keep coming back to that disc issue. It's the memory that's the problem, right? I mean, old consoles didn't have a lot of, if any, built-in memory. And so other than innovative solutions like that, where you had to build a national distribution network, or something like Sonic and Knuckles, where you're building a freakish kind of Franken prototype, or
SegaNet.
Yeah, SegaNet, exactly. Which is, again, you did actually have downloadable content. Literally, that's probably the Sega Channel or things like that, which relied on cable systems. So, when did we start seeing this become a more widespread phenomenon? How did that happen?
Well, no, there was also the N64's literal expansion pack when the game started becoming too big for the N64. You had to get a little red brick to plug into your N64 to let you play it Perfect Dark.
Yeah, and that had the interesting virtue of unlocking additional content in games that would work without it. That's actually a really good point. I mean, there were games that you couldn't play without it, but there were also games where parts of it wouldn't work or would work better if you had the extra memory, almost a sort of a reverse PC instance. Can you think of any of those?
I'm trying to remember the ones that really... I know Perfect Dark, I think multiplayer wasn't available with the expansion pack.
You had to have the expansion pack for for most things in Perfect Dark, I think. The expansion. And Rogue Squadron, things opened up if you had that too. Miranda, what about you? You're an N64, Nintendo 64 kid. Did you have the expansion pack?
A child, and no, I did not.
Okay.
I didn't even know that existed until right now.
No kidding. Okay.
Yeah.
No, you plug this little brick into the top of your N64 and then
that
lock
weird little
things.
square window that's right in front of the cartridge port.
Yeah. I always wondered what that was for.
It's to add more RAM to your system.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, none of my friends had that.
And so that unlocked Perfect Dark content, unlocked Rogue Squadron, unlocked a lot of games, actually.
Yeah, Majora's Mask.
I
can't remember if it plays without it, but in most games it enables like better frame rates or better textures, just more happening on screen.
Yeah, but there are fewer multiplayer features for things.
I think Donkey Kong 64 does not play without it.
It does not.
Shipped
I remember it was always
shipped
shipped
with
with
the
it,
expansion.
I had that lime green N64.
You were forced to accept Donkey Kong 64
Didn't have
with
the
your
Pikachu
expansion pack.
N64?
No, I never did. I had the gray one, and then I bought the green one. That was the only. No, the purple one. Purple one and the green one.
I wish I had the Pikachu one.
Which
Still
one did you
stands.
have, Miranda?
Just the black one.
Yeah?
Yeah,
the
the
stock.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will buy you a Pikachu N64.
I will happily take that home.
Okay, we'll absolutely we'll make that happen. That it's not right that you don't have that. Honestly.
Never happened.
Its little cheeks glow. It's the best.
It's beautiful.
It's kind of wonderful.
I guess speaking of what we were talking about, in some ways, Majora's Mask was kind of an unofficial expansion. It was a lot of.
No, it was a sequel.
It was a sequel,
Yeah.
but it just the way they were able to reuse a lot of the assets very cleverly.
They actually did plan a Zelda, Ocarina of Time expansion that they were going to call Ura Zelda, which means like other or outside Zelda.
I remember reading about that.
And all we got was like that eventually evolved into the Master Quest that shipped on that GameCube disc.
Right.
But it was supposed to be a much greater, like, total reworking, kind of like the second quest of the original Zelda on NES.
Yeah.
And that was going to rely on the 64 DD disc system, but that never shipped outside of Japan, so they just scrapped plans for it
once
and
again,
created Majora's Mask instead.
Back to memory again. That becomes the
Yeah,
that becomes
and
the issue.
That is the point at which this became much more common. Not just memory, but also the ability to share that easily. Like as systems, gained greater memory capacity, and we had the ability to link up through the internet to download games and download expansions and data and save that onto cartridges or onto computers. That's kind of where we had the breakthrough.
Right, because when the internet finally blew up, in the early 1990s, and then gradually as people began to gain more and more access to it on PC, you started seeing things that previously had been on disc packs. You think about something like Red Alert, their extra unit packs came on discs. You went to the store and bought them. But Total Annihilation, which was a rival of Red Alert, another RTS, started allowing you to download units off their website in the mid-1990s. And that was revolutionary. And then you go to consoles and you have something like the Dreamcast, which has a modem built into it and a tiny little thing called a VMU. And Sega actually did release downloadable content for that sucker. Some of it's still out there. You can buy extra maps, or not buy, but you can download extra maps for Choo Choo Rocket that were designed by Sonic Team. As expandable content, and you put them on that tiny. The VMU was sort of like the Sony memory card. You put them on there, and that was all the storage you had. But you found a way to do it. You cut ahead from there, and then of course have finally, we're the big, I think, breakout. And this is where hopefully I can stop talking and you guys can take over. Sorry, I've paced this badly.
I'm learning so much.
But I'm just worried that anyway. Xbox, of course, and PS2, and I realize I'm skipping a lot, so feel free to jump in with anything, but PS2 did not have built-in networking, but it did have the ability to have it added on, and that became important for Final Fantasy XI.
Yeah, I would say actually Xbox was the big breakthrough because it came with a hard drive and built-in networking. Yep. Those were the two things that no other console had to that point. They might have had one or the other, but not both.
Yep. So you had the storage space and you had the networking capability built right in. And it was around the same time that the net was maturing to the point that you could actually make good use of that. There was enough bandwidth to pull that off. So the Xbox becomes the big one. By the way, weirdly, apparently every Final Fantasy XI expansion pack, I had no idea, has been released on PS2, even the most recent ones. They keep updating it. The last one wasn't available in the States, but I had no idea. So Xbox, that's where it began. Original Xbox, which was in many ways a PC, embraced that PC philosophy. Were either of you guys Xbox owners?
No, my friend was, but I was still Nintendo.
I was.
You were?
Is where I got my big thing into shooters. Started playing a ton of Halo.
So you started playing a ton of Halo. You had Halo 2 then, right?
Yes, but I did not play online because I was still very little.
Okay. How old were you at this point, Miranda?
I don't remember, but young enough to where I did not play online.
Okay. Did you have the map packs? Did your parents download them?
I don't think my dad did. So my dad was the primary Halo player. Then he eventually dragged me in, much to my mother's dismay. And yeah, I don't think we played online till Halo 3. Like the Xbox 360 is where we really got into online.
Did you play with the Duke? With the tiny child hands?
I was a little girl, just like, I got it though.
Holding the analog stick like this?
Yeah, I was very good at sniping.
Wow,
so
I'm impressed.
It's my thing.
It's kind of like trying to play a video game with a bowling ball with buttons on it.
Yeah, I picked one of those up again recently. I was like, what the heck? How did I hold this?
But yeah, it did. It had that built-in hardware capacity, and it had a product that promoted it. I think Halo 2 in particular, it was important because of those map packs. You played, and you played with your friends, and you played with your friends, and that was a game when everyone was playing, and suddenly more maps, and I just have to, and they're not expensive, and I have to put a number in or get one of them little cards from the store, but we figured it out quickly. Did you play, Jeremy?
I did not own an original Xbox. I ended up using it a lot at work. I was in the press by like 2003, so did a lot of reviews for Xbox games. But the first Halo I actually played on Macintosh, weirdly enough, because I was like an old school Bungie guy. I was like, I'm only playing Bungie games on a Mac because that's how Bungie is meant to be, by God.
Marathon forever.
That eventually went away, but yeah, I didn't actually do that much multiplayer, so I can't really speak to the map packs. But we're talking about the console side here, but obviously all this, the map packs and stuff for Halo 2, that existed on the PC side of things for a long time. Even if you want to just look like Doom or whatever, Doom kind of started as a reverse expansion pack. It was, the first kind of successful shareware game where you downloaded the first episode, and if you liked it, you could buy the rest of the game.
That's true. I had not thought about that. The fact that in some of those old shareware shooters that the full game was almost the DLC. You got the first part of the game for free. Doom was that way. Quake was that way. I had not thought about that. That's fair. And then of course they had additional expansion packs on top of that came out later. But that's totally rad. And then we moved into the 360 and PS3 generation of consoles, and suddenly we were buying lots and lots and lots of games over the internet. Why? What happened? Why did we do that?
Because the internet got better.
Okay. It did get better. It did get faster. It became a more terrifying place in some ways, but it got better and faster. Yeah. But why? I mean, what were you buying? Was it convenience? Was it taking something you had and getting more of it?
So I think when I primarily played on Xbox 360, I still went out and bought the discs, but I would definitely buy all the map packs for Call of Duty and Halo whenever they came out.
Okay.
Like that was a thing I needed because not only did I want to play more, because I was one of those kids in high school that just played Call of Duty online. Like I didn't care about campaigns. I didn't touch them except for one, and then I was like, nah. But because it felt like it gave it so much more life, and then I was always playing with my friends, there's that desire there to keep playing it and get better.
And if your friend had the map, you wanted the map.
Yeah, of course.
That makes a lot of sense. So that was social. What about you, Brennan?
I'm trying to remember. Like, I think at that time, I was mostly doing PC, but I still usually would buy the physical, and then download other stuff off the internet. I think that's when it first started happening. It was just like, hey, you can buy your PC expansions, or you can just get them online through their connectivity. So I'm like, okay. Well.
So were you just going to the store at this point and buying cards, or did you have credit card in pocket, or were you buying? Okay, so
not that early on.
So go to the store, get cash, buy it, bring it back home. Besides map packs, what were you playing?
For like DLC stuff?
Yeah, for downloadable stuff.
I actually didn't start playing like story DLC until recently, because I was a kid and I was just like, I just want the maps. And then I guess kind of growing up, I wasn't super in tune. It's like I have time to play the main game and then I have to leave. Like that's kind of how it happened a lot of the time.
All right.
But the one I've played most recently is Citadel from Mass Effect 3. That's the best. It's my favorite DLC.
Why Citadel?
So if you don't know what Citadel is, it's basically a party with all your friends before the end of the world, and it's just the best, most fan servicey thing there is. Like I cried so much while I was playing that.
You cried while playing Citadel?
I bawled.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, this is expound.
So Mass Effect is, for me at least, all about getting to know these people around you and like saving the world together and like being a team. And this one just says, hey, remember all those friends you had that hopefully you saved? Because they could have also been dead, but that I saved. Here they all are, and like it's very glorious. They all get to go into like a combat mission with you. Like everybody, you get to your core team of 3, you and then 2 other people. But then the rest of the characters that you don't choose like follow around, and they're like constantly talking to you and making jokes about all these adventures you guys have had. And that just being my second playthrough, me finally playing this was just really satisfying. It's just like hanging out with my buds.
So it's a kind of a huge pandering fan service.
Yes, like, there's so much fan service. And then like at the end of the thing, it's actually a really long DLC. You have a party and people get super drunk and you get to learn so many very personal things about these characters that you don't get to otherwise. And I don't think the game is lacking anything if you don't play the Citadel DLC, but it just gives you like newfound appreciation for them. Like I'm romancing Tally right now, and part of the Citadel DLC is that after you complete it, your squad mates will call you and say, hey, we should go hang out in your apartment, because you get an apartment with the DLC. And so you'll get these extra scenes after that is basically said and done, like the main quest, and it kind of just keeps you interacting with your squad mates in different ways. Like we had Tally come over for a date, and we watched one of her favorite movies from when she was a kid. And she it was a musical, and she sang to us, and it was the best.
So
I cried.
Your unflagging optimism about this is delightful. So that's the good end of it.
Yeah,
now,
that's the happy side.
Yeah, let's talk because this was not always warmly received. We focus on Bethesda properties on the show, despite the last half hour, and so
someone made a boo boo.
Yeah, let's talk about the other responses that we got to DLC once it became more widespread, as people became more aware of it in the console space. And I think it's fair to say it was always accepted as a part of PC culture.
Yeah.
But in consoles, it became, and some of that, of course, the two notorious words that everyone got very, very angry about: horse armor.
Because you need armor for your horse.
Because you need armor for your horse. Brendan, can you tell us the sad tale of horse armor, or the perhaps overly exaggerated tale of horse
I just
armor?
remember playing Oblivion and having so much fun with that game, and like everything you could do, everything you could see, and then people like modders started going onto the scene and like adding new content, changing things, making things beautiful, and then Bethesda was just like, oh hey, we can do that too. Well, we're going to add some content for you guys as well. You can decorate your horses and put them into battle and wear cool armor, but you got to pay like, what was it, like $5?
I thought it was more expensive.
I think it was.
It was like 15 or something.
It was like 15, and
really
all
expensive.
it did was give your horses ugly armor that was based off of your own armor, but molded onto a horse.
Oh no!
Like they just stretched the image and kind of like wrapped around. Okay, we're done.
It was a tone deaf marketing situation. I think that was a lot of that. You had people that were giving things away that were better put together. And
I think part of it, maybe not even overtly, but maybe subliminally, had to do with the fact that the disparity between console and PC experiences in Elder Scrolls became really obvious then, because you did have modders who were just giving you whatever you wanted on the PC side. And of course that didn't exist for the console gamers. And so, people who were buying it on console, which was a pretty sizable audience, was having an inferior experience by default because the PC version just ran better, looked better, had more options. But then there was kind of this sense of like, oh, we're being exploited because they won't offer us mod support, but they will sell us like ugly horse armor for a lot of money. It creates this sort of dual citizenship. It's like the PC owners are the natives, and
that's where
the console owners are sort of the immigrants, the newcomers to this country, to the country of Cyrodiil, and maybe not being treated as well as they should be.
Yeah, as
a
immigrants
very modern, timely kind of metaphor.
That's where like the console peasants meme was kind of born from that disparity.
So Jeremy, of all of us here at the table, you were I think the only one that was writing professionally about games at this point when all these things were happening. What can you tell us about that the tension and transition in general as downloadable content moved toward consoles and handhelds?
I didn't really dabble in that all that much.
Okay.
It was something sort of outside my experience and outside my sphere of writing. So most of what I kind of caught was sort of secondhand at the office, but there was a lot of sort of like sarcasm about it, and on the podcasts at the time, things like horse armor took a lot of beating. And I think the sort of skepticism that you saw on forums was also reflected, by the same sentiments were present in the press. And I'm sure that just amplified it, because that obviously came out in our writing and our, broadcasting videos, podcasting, etc. So it just, kind of reinforced what people in forums were thinking, people who were, paying customers for the games, like, hey, yeah, they are bilking us. We are getting screwed over. And I think over time, as publishers got better about creating a good value proposition for DLC, I think people became softer and more accepting of it. But even so, like as that began to happen, you did see people who would look at things like a Namco release where the download was 14K or something, which means you're basically paying to unlock a key for something that's already on the disc.
Yes.
And that became more of the tension point. Like, are they actually adding something new to the game? Am I paying for something that otherwise might not have existed, that I might not have ever had access to? Or am I just paying to unlock something that exists on the product I already bought? And that's where the conversation, I think, really started to spin.
Yeah,
and
I think Street
travel.
Fighter in particular had a lot of that, where there was already, they call it like on the disc DLC, where you were just paying to unlock that thing that was already there from the beginning with, but they weren't ready to sell it to you yet. And there was a lot of both. I mean, I remember after the Horse Armor, my eyes kind of opened up to the DLC market and seeing like the wide spectrum of having like, eventually Bethesda had their Knights of the Nine and Shivering Isles expansion packs, which are really good expansion DLCs, which added a lot of new content, a lot of new items. And then you saw other games publishers having like, a weapon DLC. It was like, you want an extra pistol with a cool color. Here's $5, please. And it's just like, there was a spectrum, I think.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that that's gotten better?
For the most part, I mean, you still see, even to this day, DLC both handled poorly and competently. I love the Batman Arkham franchise, and I think their DLC has been some of the most divisive ever since the start, where they were cutting it in pieces and going, okay, Best Buy, you get this character skin, and Target, you get this secret map pack that unlocks 6 months later for everybody else. And then like, I think by Arkham Knight and Arkham Origins, there was like 20 different retailers all had their own skin. And it just, the skins I could live with, but then when they were like, okay, but only PS owners get the Scarecrow missions, 6 months later, everybody else I'm like, okay, when you're taking actual mission content that's not just a cosmetic thing, that's when it kind of got really ridiculous.
What about you, Miranda?
So generally, I am very happy with Story DLC because I want to know more about these worlds and I'm happy to pay a little extra. But then kind of on the negative facet of that is that a lot of times you'll see something that's sometimes kind of critical. It's like, hey, why was this not part of the game? Going back to Mass Effect, 'cause I've been playing that. Like the Leviathan DLC kind of tells you the origin story of the Reapers. That's DLC!
Yeah, it's kind of important.
It's like, what? And just kind of seeing that's very disappointing. But then, like I said, flip side is you get Citadel, which is super fun fan servicey thing, which I would never see why they would work on during development because it's such a fun thing. But generally, I think story DLC tends to be handled better. Like if I look at Dishonored stuff, it's just a lot of fun extra things, playing as Dowd and stuff.
It seems to have become intrinsic to the business model of a lot of the largest developers and many smaller ones too. I mean, almost everything.
Yeah, I think it helps that we're seeing kind of a better division and explanation of what things are and kind of setting expectations by publishers. And I think it also helps that after 10 years. Consumers have a much better sense of what they're getting into. So it's pretty clear, like, this is a cosmetic DLC. You're paying money just to, make your car pretty or have red armor or whatever. This one is just pure currency. Like, you're paying money for in-game money.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of the central hook of mobile gaming right now. Like, that's just what you do.
Yeah.
And then, there's this other kind over here that's, you're paying money for extra content. It's like, a semi-sequel to the game or an expansion, kind of in the classic, CNC sense. So, yeah, I think, having those kind of natural divisions that are clearer and also better understood by people who have become savvy to this, I think that helps. And again, I think, mobile can't be factored out because so many people who are, not really into video games that are just kind of a casual audience buy Candy Crush packs or whatever. I get little iTunes receipts because my wife has bought like $5 worth of Candy Crush Continues. I'm like, all right, if it makes you happy, that's fine.
Yeah, the business model for the industry is built on downloadable content.
Yeah, I think that's really, that's just that kind of like, oh, it's a casual little microtransaction. It's no big deal. That's really pushed acceptance in the mainstream. And I think, for better or for worse, that's kind of how it's evolved. So now you see something like Pokemon Go where people are like, yeah, I'll buy candy or whatever. And it's, it's a big business. And I'm actually kind of encouraged by Pokemon Go because the findings have come out that it's not just a business model built around whales who are spending $1,000. It's more evenly distributed. It's something that appeals to people, and they want to play, and they want to spend a little bit of money on it. Like, that's healthy. That's good. I'm glad to see that. It's a better approach.
It's nice also when these mobile microtransactions are always on things that you could get if you played it for a bit, and they don't lock you out. There was a lot of bad mobile games where just like you can only get this leg up if you buy it or spend 1,000 hours in game. Where it's like Pokemon Go, it's like you just have to go to a Pokestop and you can get what you'd usually pay for.
So that's also kind of a problem I have with Overwatch in a way, because it's a game you pay full price for, and there's cool skins and stuff you can unlock, but unlocking them takes so, or like the good ones takes so long, and you can't actually buy just currency. You have to buy these random boxes, which you hope you get currency so you can maybe unlock the skins. Like,
the gacha aspect I feel is a little exploitative.
Yeah, it's
better suited for free-to-play games.
Yeah, it's just
like if you've already paid full price, I should be able to pay for that specific thing and not just like maybe you'll get something cool.
A lot of my reading before buying a game is about how DLC structure works in a game. Yeah. The fact I like what Jeremy said, that they are more transparent about this in many places now. The notable exception for me on that can be season passes. Where
thanks Arkham Knight,
where you're just like, well, we'll give you a discount, but we're not going to tell you exactly what you're getting either.
My approach with season passes is like, if this is a franchise that I really love or a developer that I really love and that I want to support, then I will get a season pass. But otherwise,
so it's largely based on previous legacy of games for you.
Yeah.
What about you, Brennan?
That bit me in the butt with Arkham Knight because I loved Warner Brothers and Rocksteady doing Batman. And then they had like, hey, $60, $40 season pass, maybe something cool. Then I was like, what is it? Okay, fine. It's Batgirl and racing and some story stuff.
Yeah.
Any of the details? No. And then Batgirl tends to be like 20-minute long expansion. I'm just like, and then you had when it first came out, you couldn't even use her in the other like challenge modes. I'm like, so I paid. This is your main lead foot off with. And you only give you a 20-minute demo of a character you can't use ever again until later down the line at the end of the season pass, like, okay, actually, we'll give you more stuff that lets you use her again.
I've never bought a season pass. You, Jeremy? Nope, never. I wondered. I just I don't know if it's my old manism, but I'm more willing to. I'd rather pay a little more and know what I'm getting.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
I've moved to that model.
Bought a season pass in a very long time. Last time I used to was for map packs. So when I knew I was going to be in deep deploy multiplayer.
I think there's often, even today, it's the misconception of sometimes how DLC is made. A lot of people are very hesitant because they think it's always we just made this full product. Let's just take off this piece and sell it to you later. When some games have done that, but more often than not, it's usually the game is nearing the end of production. Yeah. They're like, okay, what's next for us? Let's start thinking about these next expansion contents. And you can see it too, like in a lot of the Fallout content, like it's crafted so well. That they completed the game. They know what works, they know what doesn't work, and they use that knowledge to make more content that actually works better. And that's why I think that Far Harbor solved a lot of problems with the original game, where they're like, okay, we know that people don't like the story of the main game. Let's kind of switch things up.
Yeah, they did a good job with that, and I think that's a good segue. I think Bethesda's done a good job with that on Fallout 4 in many cases. I also Rockstar's done a good job with GTA Online that way, just coming up with new interesting things. That stunt thing, cunning stunts is. Have you guys fooled around with that? It's lovely. It turns GTA 5 into a Hot Wheels kart racer. It's really, really pretty nuts. But going back to the Bethesda stuff, we're going to segue over into this finally talking about Fallout on Vault.
In a
very long, yay Fallout. 6 pieces of DLC in this particular game. We had Fallout 3 DLC, we had New Vegas DLC, we had, and now 6 pieces here. We're on number 4, Contraptions Workshop, came out not too long ago, which is sort of the redstone sections of Minecraft in Fallout's weird, kind of rusty, clunky. I had a lot of fun with it. I liked Contraptions Workshop. Have you? You haven't played it, right, Jeremy?
I haven't, but I watched our guides dude send in videos of himself like setting up things to launch dead bodies to people. And I was like, All right, so I can see this going to some dark places.
It's a puzzle game with no solution. I think that's kind of how it works. It's like, hey, you look at it and you go, can I make this work? And that's what you do. It's fun. I liked it. Automatron had robots, and that was enough. Robots forever. I actually enjoyed Automatron quite a bit.
I like the story too. I thought it was just fun.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, Curie's your favorite anyway. So,
yeah, so anything with robots and Fallout is kind of a thing for me.
So how was Curie recently?
She's doing good.
Yeah,
doing good.
glad to hear that. So robots, you like Automatron. Wasteland Workshop, where'd you guys fall on that?
That was a weird one. Like, and looking back on all this DLC, it's very unlike Bethesda's previous DLC packs for other games, because this one was so half a Fallout game and half a crafting game that they kind of split the DLC down the middle, where it may not appease everybody. And I've seen people who are like, I want more Far Harbors.
Yeah.
And you only get 2, maybe 2.5, because the robot was kind of equal parts.
Yeah.
Were story, and then the other ones were all about crafting, and like that's also like the kind of the dangers of Season Pass, where you don't know what you're getting ahead of time. You buy it for the story, you don't always get all the story.
What are your thoughts, Miranda?
I kind of think it makes sense because there are so many people who just want to tinker and fall and build their towns and just mess with all that. So I think it's fine that they're facilitating that audience as well. Like they're trying to help them build cooler things.
I reviewed Automatron, Wasteland Workshop, and Contraptions Workshop, all the crafty ones, and those were all hard to review for the reasons we're talking about and others. But I got joy out of all of them. Yeah. Like there were neat things to be found in them. There were, I think of all of them, Wasteland's probably the weakest. But even that was there was fun. And then you have a more kind of classic story one. You have Far Harbor, which I think Brendan's played more than about anyone alive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something you rarely see, and also it's a kind of a good thing for Bethesda, because with DLC, you're also competing against your own community, because modding has been so robust that you can often find really good mods that you're like, well, we're not paying for this. Like, sometimes it's like, if just like an overhaul of like, textures is one thing, but then if they add like, hey, here's new content, you could do all these cool things that you couldn't do in the original game. People are like, whoa, like, why didn't Bethesda do this? I think there was a lot of in Skyrim that they're like, adding like spears and horse combat. And they were like, I remember at one point Bethesda showcased a bunch of things that they never actually implemented. People were like, well, why didn't you let modders do this?
Well, and that's especially relevant now that, going back to your analogy, they've sort of democratized the nation. Mods are now available on consoles.
Yeah, which is really nice.
It is extremely nice and a great feature, but it does place them in direct competition with their community in a weird sense.
In some ways. I do think that, like, with the story and the content expansions, like Far Harbor, they really played to their strengths, because nobody makes a nice open world full of fun things like Bethesda does, and that's something you can't easily replicate with mods, because that takes a long time. People are still trying it, though, and there have been those talks of, I think there's a Fallout 3, or maybe it's a Fallout 4 expansion people working on that goes to Seattle.
It's Fallout 4.
Yeah, it's
Fallout 4. Yeah, so like people are trying to get on that, but that's something that Bethesda has a leg up on, because there's so much more ingrained with that, and they know what to develop.
You're leaning in the mic, Jeremy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as long as Bethesda doesn't openly steal mods to create their own downloadable content, it should be fine.
Interesting you should say that.
Right.
There was an interesting report like a couple days ago about a DLC to New Vegas called Autumn Leaves, which bears a lot of similarities to Far Harbor's Brain Dead quest, in that there is a vault, there are robots who are used to be people from pre-war, there's a murder mystery, there's some outrageous personalities, the key plot points of voice modulation and having intimacies with robots, art discussing, and a lot of other things are very much the same, but Pete Hines came out and said that he looked into it and they did not steal anything. There was no inspiration, but I don't know.
Wow.
Whether or not some designer may have just saw it and got inspiration, I don't know. I hope that's not the case, but I mean, it does beg the question, if you do, should mods be credited as like, hey, we thought this guy was so cool, we made our own version of it? Like, should they get a little bit of recognition for that?
Ooh, that enters some fun territory. Goodness, what are your thoughts on that, Miranda?
Well, so kind of stepping back from that just a little bit, keeping with mods like consoles and stuff. Modding on consoles, though it works, is still very limited. So I don't think we would see huge expansions coming out like we would see for PC. But kind of going back to what you guys were saying, if they were to copy or make very similar expansions based on mods, they should absolutely work with the modders because that's real bad.
Work with credit. That's hard, and yet there's so many ideas out there.
Yeah.
That's the other bit.
I mean,
like,
the murder mystery aspect has been done before.
Yeah.
Sure.
But there's just a very huge amount of similarities that may make you go, okay,
Yeah, I
I
didn't
could
read
see if
that
someone
one.
may have.
I mean,
Yeah.
Jeremy, what are your thoughts?
I mean, this is the reason why publishers won't take idea letters from readers.
Yep.
yeah.
Like, you know, when someone says, "Hey, I have a great idea for, you know, your Mario game," they take that letter and they throw it in the trash because they can't be caught in a position that would compromise them like this.
Yep.
Right.
But with modders, like, it's weird because these people are actually, you know, creating their own cool idea for the Mario game. So, like, how much awareness does the publisher have of that, the developer? It's difficult, and it does
Yeah.
open up a huge can of worms. But, you know, that is, to mix my metaphors, like the Pandora's box that can't be closed again. Like,
yeah, it's there.
like, you can't take away mods from the Fallout audience at this point.
No,
Like,
and
that
what-
would not
be
fly.
terrible.
No, and I don't think they want to either. I don't think they regret that they did what they did. This for 99.9% of people involved in this is a good, exciting thing.
Assuming that this was an innocent coincidence, like, how can the publisher possibly be expected to vet every single piece of mod
Yes.
Yeah,
content
there's
that's created?
so much.
No, I don't think
it's
it's possible.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, you know, I wasn't meaning to imply that they stole that.
Sure.
Just that the question had been raised.
No, I think
Oh, yeah.
I don't think you did that at all, and I don't think we did either. I don't think we'd want to do that. Just this, and it's not like video games are, you know, the most original medium sometimes, you know. Anyway,
You see a lot of tropes.
Persona 4 is an Agatha Christie novel with.
I see a lot more movies based on video games these days than video games based on movies.
Oh, there is that. Oh no.
So who's unoriginal?
That's true.
That's right. Yeah.
Of course, when you're Valve and you have good modders, you just hire them.
No, you can just do that too. That'll work too. And I wonder if Bethesda hires modders. I mean, having such a rich community out there.
I think I've heard of that in
I bet
some
you-
capacity. I
Skyrim,
forget.
surprised they
Skyrim
don't.
Kid or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
So that's a lot of DLC. 2 more coming out soon. We've got Voltec Workshop coming very soon, and we're expecting on that a combination of crafting, and apparently you can experiment on the people in your vault. I can't wait to see how that works.
Now, if you want to hear more about that, you have to buy our Vault DLC where we talk about the DLC.
Oh, okay, the Vault Podcast Field DLC?
Yes, there's
Oh,
a
wow,
DLC to this podcast.
Oh, we should totally put this behind a paywall. That's such a good idea. Not really. And then finally, Nuka World, which is the amusement park mod that expansion that we don't actually know that much about, except that it looks like more story.
Yeah.
Right? So
New location, love it.
excited about that. Look forward to a future Vault IGN when those are out to talk about that. Normally this is where we put Total Digression, but we've gone long, so I'm just gonna. This will be the first Fallout. Since we had our Total Digression was earlier, where we had a DLC history segment. So
Like
instead,
a 40-minute digression.
yeah, it's a 40-minute digression. So instead, I'll wrap this up with a final question. What's the DLC or the expansion that you connect with most? What's one at a personal level? You've already talked
Oh,
about yours.
surprise, where you said Citadel.
Yeah, you already said Citadel.
Yeah.
So and you explained and articulated why earlier, Miranda. But what are ones that you're just like, wow, I'm really glad I played that. Jeremy, can you think of one?
Yeah, for me, it was all the add-on maps and missions and quests and characters and so forth that Nintendo and Square Enix published on a weekly basis for Dragon Quest IX.
Oh, wow.
Like, that was a great game to begin with, a game that you could pretty much play forever, but then they just kept adding. Every week, you could either, like, meet up with characters from the classic Dragon Quest games, or go out on adventures and fight, familiar bosses from the older games, or just have a new quest. That was great, and that really gave the game extra life because it encouraged people to go out and before street passing was a real thing, they had this sort of makeshift street passing in Dragon Quest IX. So maybe not quite what you would expect on the Vault, but definitely something that gave that game added legs, and it already was something I spent 100 plus hours with.
That was a great time to live in Japan when Dragon Quest IX was out, because you go to Nagoya JR and there would be 100 people at a gathering point just wrapped around, standing around a clock all the time. This big clock in Nagoya
Station.
Station.
Go of its day.
Yeah, and they'd be standing there map swapping with their DSs open. It was lovely to see and really cool. What about you, Brendan?
Oh man, that's a hard one.
Yeah,
I might be a bit egotistical here.
Okay.
The expansion that meant the most to me was the one that I made myself.
Oh, there we go. Get that ego. Let's hear it.
Little known fact, for my college thesis, I made a Dragon Age Origins mod that was an expansion of the available Origins that you started out as. There was a human noble, but there was no human commoner. So I made the human commoner expansion intro all by myself. And by the time I started making that mod, the mod community had been dead for 2 years because no one made Dragon Age mods. So all I had to help me was a 2-year-old Spanish YouTube video of someone making a mod, and I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't mod nearly as much to know what I was working on, but I somehow made a working map that inserted into the game, and I hired people. Well, I asked people around the campus to be my voice actors and actresses, and it somehow came together, and I had my thesis.
Aww.
And you can never find that ever again because it's gone.
Oh.
Deleted from the entire world.
I've given a lot of thought back and forth, and I think that I can't fathom a world without Miss Pac-Man. There were a lot of these, and most of them were downloadable, but I don't want to live in a universe where Miss Pac-Man never happened. And furthermore, where the expansion of the expansion took place, and somebody made the 1-bit mod for Miss Pac-Man, which was itself a mod of Pac-Man, that sped Miss Pac-Man up. All you had to do was change 1 bit, and the game ran faster. And there is nothing I'd rather play to this day than a good Miss Pac-Man machine with that chip equipped and a good solid controller on it that turns wonderful. California Extreme was good for that.
I know one of your coworkers owns one in his living room.
He does. Sam Claiborne has one, and he's brought it in here once. I am not a good Miss Pac-Man player, but I can play. I'm the IGN Miss Pac-Man champion, 2019, 219,640. But which is not that great a score for Miss Pac-Man, but for around here, will do. And that was on Sam's machine.
I guess we're all humble bragging today.
Yeah, 219,640. All right. So anyway, that's the end of that. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Guys, you have let us do something we love for a long time. We are 20 episodes into this thing. We never intended to get this far. I think we're probably going to do at least one more because we've got more DLC coming to kind of wrap Fallout 4 up. That'll be a while, so keep us on your feed. If you'd rate us, we'd appreciate that. 5 stars is always the proper number. Less is not. So if you'd rate us on iTunes, it always helps us out. And send us your mail at #VaultIGN. Once again, any questions, comments, anything you want to let us know. Guys, you got anything else? Miranda, anything you want to plug this week?
There's been a lot of anime reviews on the site. Please click on them.
All right. Please click on them. Do you want them to watch them and read them, or just click on them?
It would be cool if you read them.
Okay.
I'd really appreciate that. We've been working hard to kind of...
It's fine.
We've been working hard to try to do more anime reviews, and we have a top 10 anime beach episodes going up.
There you go. That's an interesting. You got people on the beach doing beach stuff. You get that boat that chops that kid up.
Yeah.
There's
some dinosaurs.
This is taking a dark turn for beach
that's
episodes.
It's interesting features, so please check that out.
Yeah, if you want to learn more about propeller manglings, read that article. Brennan?
There's a lot of Pokemon.
Yeah.
There's too much Pokemon. If you are still in that Pokemania, we have a nice Pokemon Go guide that we have all worked on.
We all worked on it, yeah.
Everything you need to know because the game tells you nothing, which is our biggest boon. Thank you, Pokemon Go, for not explaining anything.
Yeah, the guide speed's been fun lately, hasn't it?
Oh yeah.
So there's that. And Jeremy, where can people find that you're right? You run a prominent video game website. You do all kinds of things. Tell us about what you're up to.
Yeah, just go to USgamer.net. IGN's great, but USgamer.net.
So much better.
It's the stuff. It's the sauce.
So, all right. And I don't know. I've been making stuff. You can find it on IGN. I'm Petty Comet Jared on Twitter. You are
At Havoc Grows. That's Havoc with a K.
At Raga_Fraga.
And I am at GameSpite. It's like GameSpot, but more spiteful.
So there we are. Volt IGN, episode 20. Thank you so much. And until next time, enjoy your apocalypse.